Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Marketing and Branding Leaders Knowledge Summit. These one-hour webinars bring together some of the best and brightest thinkers in the world of marketing and branding to share their knowledge, their insights, their expertise, so that your brand can reach its ultimate potential and improve your overall business. I mean, we all know when you make your brand better, you make your whole business better. And that's what these summits are about. It's a way for us to learn best practices from a wide range of industries, from a wide range of presenters, and different business situations. I'm delighted that you're here with us today and invite you to come back again and again as we continue to host more and more of these knowledge summits. Each summit will tackle one issue from two different points of view. We'll look at very current and very emerging issues. Our topic today is shifting a brand's positioning to achieve exponential growth. I'm delighted to introduce our two presenters, Chip Purrington, the head of BrainSprint, which is a strategy and innovation firm that specializes in creating value by promoting, activating, and implementing effective innovation. And Mark Schnapper, the head of Schnapper Design, and a multidisciplinary graphic designer and copywriter for more than 40 years in the very competitive New York creative industry. So today we'll start off with Chip. Chip, I will turn it over to you.
Thanks, Glenn. It's a pleasure to be with you all. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our own journey at BrainSprint, how we've had to adapt to the COVID-19 situation and adapt our product line, and in doing that, make our innovation offering relevant for those who are going through the crisis that we're all experiencing together. So the first thing I want to talk about is that priorities shift during a crisis, and some of that might be obvious since we're already going through it, but there are things like, how do I maintain growth? How do I know what to prioritize? Where do I cut costs? And how do I innovate? And many people, many companies and leaders are focused on survival. In our situation as BrainSprint, we have a positioning around helping companies to grow and to excel and go beyond. Well, that's kind of a hard sell when you've got companies and leaders saying, geez, I am cutting payroll, I'm furloughing employees, I got to figure out if I'm going to survive. And we found a lot of our clients and prospects saying, I got to turn off innovation because it's using cash and I need that cash for other places. And one of the things that we found is that innovation is not just something you do when you want to grow, but in fact, it's a way of thinking. That way of thinking allows you to solve problems more effectively and prepare yourself for the future. So if you don't innovate during a time of crisis, you lose momentum, you may end up prioritizing the wrong things. The people who are the good people in your company, the stars, get frustrated and want to leave. You miss promising opportunities. When you come out of the crisis, if you haven't done the homework and created the legwork to get to the next stage, you've got customers who are looking for the next thing and you aren't ready. And that gives competitors an opportunity to really advance. So as we looked at how to adjust ourselves in order to prepare companies for this, we wanted to use innovation as a way to navigate the crisis situation and be more effective. So that means creating novel solutions to the crisis challenges that you're having. It means accelerating revenue, projects that you may have had that you were working on and developing. Now they need to create revenue to add to the pot. And finally, all of this needs to be done cost effectively. Can't spend multi-millions of dollars developing over months and months and months when you need to make sure that what you're creating has a high degree of success and you're testing and iterating your product or your idea or your solution cost effectively. And so as our personal story, one of the things that is, really kind of interesting is that when we did research as to how innovation firms are dealing with these kind of challenges, we found that in 2008, after the big crisis that some of us experienced there, many companies had to cut back in a similar way to what they're doing today. what they found as you got into 2010 and 2011 and beyond is those companies who had maintained or adjusted and made their innovation more effective got out of the crisis faster and were able to succeed. And part of that is because when you can unleash people's decision-making capability, you start to create really novel results. And, interesting quote here from the Wall Street Journal is that many great inventions or discoveries were created during times very much like this. So that Isaac Newton discovered gravity and invented calculus during a time when he was quarantined for the bubonic plague. William Shakespeare, in a later period, wrote King Lear and Macbeth during a time when he had been under quarantine. So there's good evidence that this time that we have that's forcing us to think differently may in fact be a good thing. So in our case, in BrainSprint, when we're talking about helping companies with innovation, we're focusing on growth, we're focusing on getting things to market and creating a pro-innovation culture. And that last one is really important because it's getting people to use a time-tested process to identify and prioritize problems, to solve them in novel ways, and then to test and iterate those solutions over time. Results in faster decision making. It results in better overall decisions that have a bigger impact. And it results in employees coming together to solve things collaboratively. And one of the things that what we've discovered as we've sort of pitched this process and talked to prospects about it is they're starting to see this. They've moved out of the, okay, I need to cut and furlough. Those things have happened. And now they're starting to poke their head up and say, okay, I've got a business to run. I have a new reality. How am I going to deal with that? For many companies, this is new territory. These are things they haven't had to deal with before, where, a major customer is in the transportation industry or the hospitality industry, and they're struggling so much, they're not going to be a major customer buying the same things they were buying just 2 months ago. And, how do you refocus your business to deal with that? And maybe it's you adjust your customer set. Maybe it's you adjust your product line. Maybe it's you helping them with their own challenges. Maybe there are creative financing things that you can do. All of these things are areas where you can employ the agile innovation process in order to deliver the value for your clients immediately and set them up to be successful in the future. Now, one of the things that is really interesting is that as companies look to create and do innovative things, there are a number that have kind of come up and gotten a boost, if you will, from this different kind of activity. And some examples are Screener, which is a shared streaming and entertainment virtual company. So they allow friends to get together and see a movie, but like you would do in a real movie and talk and have a social component, not just sit and watch the movie in the dark. They create that experience virtually so that you can do that. Another is a company called Replica, which is a customized friend. So as many of us have sat here alone or maybe with a family, but you spend a lot of time by yourself instead of talking with colleagues and interacting with colleagues. This is an AI-based customized friend that you can set up the perfect kind of friend for you. And that friend then, although virtual, is naturally or artificially, in this case, I guess, set up to respond to you in exactly the way you want to be responded to. And finally, a company called Flow Lab, which is a gamification company that focuses on reducing anxiety through gamification. And many of us have experienced that anxiety around planning our own businesses or helping customers work through their problems, even just managing our day in a different way, all the while watching the news and wondering what's going to happen next, or the pandemic is going to create a personal serious health situation. So companies like this are taking advantage today of the uncertainty of the new reality and creating the new products of tomorrow. At BrainSprint, that's the kind of thing that we want to do with all of our clients so that they can be prepared to come out of this whole and come out of this on the winning side.
Couple of things that you said that I really thought was interesting. One is, great innovation often comes out of adversity. It reminds me for how many years I always heard my mother say, necessity is the mother of invention.
Right.
So I think that there's a lot of really interesting ramifications of that. And in particular, you were talking about how, people are going to be looking for innovation. They're going to be looking for new solutions as we emerge from this crisis. And if you're not doing that now, if you're not preparing for that now, someone else will be. And you may then be at a competitive disadvantage if you're not taking the opportunity now. It's there's the old expression, right? When opportunity arrives, it's too late to prepare. So I think that that really hits it on the head. Is how do you see organizations using those kind of two issues, of those two very interconnected issues of innovation coming out of adversity and innovation being almost a necessity right now, when you are, as you say, strapped? I remember last week you and I had a chance to talk, and you mentioned that previously you'd talked to companies about how to grow. Now you're talking about how to survive. How do you help an organization in survival mode, kind of come to grips with these very opposite poles?
I think the biggest thing, Glenn, is about thinking of innovation differently. A lot of people have this idea that innovation is this big formal process that takes time and attention and is something that is costly. And some companies certainly take that approach. But you don't have to take that approach. It can be as simple as doctors using a 3D printer to make their own PPE. Again, they weren't 3D printing experts. They didn't have a gigantic event to create these. They had an idea. They went to a 3D printer and they made some stuff and tried it out. And they probably made 10, 20, 30 versions until they found one that works. And what do you know? Now we have an innovation. And if it's good enough, it might be something that's not only helpful to you personally, but is something that's sellable to other people that they hadn't thought of or can't do on their own. Mm-hmm. So that's the first piece, is really about thinking of innovation differently. The second piece is really about managing your stress and anxiety around how you approach innovation and how you deal with a crisis during that time. And one of the things that we focus on, it sounds a bit new age, but it's on meditation. And every day I start my day with a meditation exercise. And what I find is that helps me get grounded in the things that I need to do to be successful, instead of going online and finding out there's some crazy tweet that's changed the market conditions, or the CDC is, now saying that there's going to be a second wave. And, those kind of things come up all the time and they add to anxiety. So if you have a coping skill to keep yourself grounded, then you're much more able to deal with the challenges in an objective way and move quickly through that decision-making process and come out with good decisions on the other end.
Interesting. And how about where do you see the kind of the role of the leader in the organization, whether it's the formal leader by title, or is it maybe in the informal leaders that kind of help this kind of culture of innovation that you're describing?
So one of the things that we do is to coach our leaders on setting the example. So if the leader is projecting nervousness and concern and all those things that are real, then you're very much more likely to engender that in everybody who's around you. And it's a hard thing to do. So that's part of the reason that in the meditation example, we focus on those things that often aren't part of traditional business strategy planning, but they are important because it's about communication. It's about, setting standards and setting expectations. And so those are three critical things that business leaders need to do if they're going to move successfully through this and bring a large team of people who have a lot of anxiety with them. So it's not just an individual effort. It's about, creating this collaboration together and not be frozen in place.
The companies that you've seen do this well, where is the initial spark typically within the organization?
The initial spark I've always seen starts at the C level and then goes down to if it's a large enterprise, goes down to the divisional heads. But it also is, the people who have the entrepreneurial spirit, who are willing to kind of move out of the corporate way of doing things and experiment and try things out. So now's not the time to have large meetings and debate what will work and what won't work. Now is the time to go in and try stuff. And if you find something that's working on a small scale, now you've got some evidence that it's worth moving forward. So again, setting that tone and finding those people in your organization who naturally think that way and helping them to utilize that skill on behalf of the organization is a winning strategy.
Any particular techniques that prove most effective?
Sure. I mean, we take people through a process, and that process is very similar. I'm going to share it with you here. We use a design sprint, and design thinking is part of that sprint. But we spend a lot of time focusing on understanding the problem and opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And if you really take the time to do that, you understand the context beyond sort of the obvious things that you want to solve. So if you are having, customers that are canceling products, that's sort of the obvious problem that one would solve. And you say, okay, well, I don't want them to cancel the products. But maybe there's an opportunity in canceling some of those products or changing the supply chain for you that allows you to make a particular change that is great for the future. So one of the things early on when this crisis was still in China, it was very interesting that Apple is very dependent on China through Foxconn to create the iPhones. One of the things that they announced was that they were pushing a lot of that production or thinking about building infrastructure in other countries like Indonesia in order to, at that time, have production. But also, over the long term, that helps them to spread risk in a situation like this and also create some competition amongst companies that are, or entities that are part of their supply chain, as well as taking advantage of FX rates that are different in different countries that may be advantageous at a certain point in time. And so if they had made that announcement while everybody's expecting iPhone sales to be at a certain rate and at a certain time when the new product is released, it's very hard to make those kind of changes. Once the pot is stirred and people have already taken into account that iPhones won't be delivered and they'll be late, now there's the opportunity to go do that and not send the wrong signal to the marketplace. And so taking opportunities like that is a huge win. And that happens by understanding the problem, moving through the process of listening to your customer, creating solutions, thinking about the impact on the business model, and then testing your idea. And this process is something you can move through quickly in days, resulting in a solution that can really impact your business for many years to come.
Great. How many people are typically involved in a process like this? Is it kind of a one-person initiative, or is it a huge team typically?
Somewhere in between. So it's not generally, while individuals may think this way, the whole point is to get collaborative groups to be working together in this way. So typically, when we're doing this in normal times, between 7 and 14 people who are creating this event together. And typically, an event is from 1 to 3 days. And it starts with a lot of time spent on figuring out what problem you want to solve. The second day is thinking through the solution set. And the third day is prioritizing the solutions, thinking through how you're going to validate key assumptions. And the third day is all about beginning to put those ideas to the test with real customers and putting together an implementation plan based on what you learned. So 3 days is a fair amount of time for people that are focused with other jobs and strapped. But then when you think about the impact of what you could create to be a lasting solution for years, doesn't seem like much time at all.
Great. I love your emphasis on that first step, defining the problem, because we see that a lot too, that the challenge is making sure that you spend enough time to know what you're really trying to solve or solve for from a strategic standpoint before racing to tactical solutions. So I love hearing that.
Absolutely. And one of my mentors, Clay Christensen at the Harvard Business School, he recently passed, but his whole theory was this concept of jobs to be done. And that's really what understanding the problem is about, because depending on how you frame the problem, you can come up with very different solutions. And by framing the problem broadly, you start to move out of those very small adaptations to existing solutions, and you start to move into stepwise changes that can really make an impact on the industry. So, Elon Musk, who we all know, did a great job of that with his electric car. Electric cars weren't new. They had been around for a decade at least, but typically they were something that people who were, more tech nerds or very focused on the environment would utilize and purchase. And his idea was, maybe this could be a high performance sports car. And the high performance sports car market had always been talking about engine sizes and number of liters and horsepower. And so everybody who was purchasing a car that wanted that kind of thing focused on that for a high-end sports car. Well, he did a very simple test where he took an existing sports car, took the engine out and put in existing parts for an electric vehicle, and then tested it with people. Now, it wasn't the level of sophistication and refinement that the end product was, but it was enough to have an NPV and get people to actually interact with a real product. And what he found was that during that time, when he tested this amongst a few hundred people, he ended up with 75 orders where people put $10,000 down as a deposit for a car that wouldn't exist for 4 years. And, that's when you have something and you've made a step change, not just improved, slightly from 1 year to the next.
Well, Chip, thank you so much for sharing this. I hope everyone sees some applications perhaps to their businesses or their clients' businesses, and that this has been helpful. It's been very, very instructive. I've got some great tips, a few columns of notes here for myself. So thank you again. Appreciate your time and your insights and for sharing this with all of us today.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure to participate.
Mark's topic today is about consolidating a successful brand's leadership. And he'll tell you a fascinating story about how that all came together. So with that, let me turn it over to Mark.
Thank you, Glenn, and hello, everyone. It's good to be with you. I'm going to talk today about a leading brand in the maritime industry, a company that already enjoyed global name recognition and brand equity when it hired my firm for help with brand identity and communications. Its name is Moran, and I'll tell you about its goals, how we worked together to achieve them, what the results were, and what lessons Moran's experience might hold for other brands. Let's begin by taking a look at Moran's situation. Moran is the oldest and largest tugboat and barge company on the U.S. East and Gulf coasts. It provides ship docking, marine transportation, and a host of related services. And in the photo on the left, you see some Moran tugboats docking the Queen Mary on its arrival from its maiden voyage in New York City. On the right is one of today's largest container ships, and there you see a Moran tug assisting the container ship. The ship, by the way, is bigger than an aircraft carrier. It's 4 city blocks long, and the tugboat has special capabilities to be able to assist such vessels. For example, it has rotating propulsion units instead of conventional propellers, and these enable it to go dead sideways in the water. It can also go from full speed ahead to a dead stop in only 92 feet. Moran's customer list reads like a who's who of the shipping industry. It includes virtually every passenger line and cargo carrier in the maritime world, as well as the United States Navy. As you can see here, Moran does have some history with artful design. These are copies of Moran's corporate magazine from the 1950s and 60s. You're looking at 4 different covers there. And notice that the company has licensed some really fantastic maritime artwork. 3 of these images are actually paintings. The one on the bottom left is a photograph. Let's fast forward to 2001. This is what Moran's brand communications looked like the year we met them. And as you can see, at some point between the 1970s and the 2000s, the company's interest in brand design communication seems to have waned. The look doesn't really reflect their position of market leadership. One decisive step they did take around 1999 to get things back on track was they commissioned a new logo design, and here you see that. As you can see, the design of the symbol mimics the trapezoidal shape of the tugboat smokestack very literally, and we thought that that was a bit problematic. And in an early meeting, we recommended to Moran that they redraw the mark to correct that. And we also felt that the name was a bit small and that the mark could benefit from bringing the name up alongside in a second signature and making it much larger. You'll see how all that worked out in the slides that are to come. The first thing we did for Moran was research. We interviewed some of the company's top executives. We asked them many questions about Moran's history, its operations, its business model, its business philosophy, and other fundamentals. And we also poured over executive summaries and old brochures, old corporate magazines, photos from the company's archives, and other materials. One of the things we learned was that Moran was founded in 1860 by this guy, Michael Moran, who began as a mule runner on the Erie Canal. He had a single mule, and for a fee, Moran's mule would tow your barge. After a few years of that, Michael pocketed his life savings and lit out for New York City, where he soon purchased a 1/2 interest in a tugboat, and that was Moran's first tug. One of the key things that we learned from the research is that Moran's brand vision originated with Michael. It's a commitment to quality, service, and constructive culture, which you meet by providing the best equipment, hiring the best people, and making safety your top priority. Management takes a long-term approach and is leanly structured to enable nimble responsiveness to short-term imperatives. Let me read you an excerpt from a Moran essay in the corporate magazine that sums up the essence of the brand. The essay is a commemorative reflection on the occasion of Moran's 150th anniversary. Long before there were business schools repackaging customer service as a high-flown marketing theory, Moran's mariners, shoreside staff, and managers were practicing it as if their livelihoods depended upon it, which in fact they did. In an industry where reputations are forged on the water, it simply made good sense. To keep your customer, you provided safe, reliable, courteous service. You applied professional skills and commitment, your knowledge, instincts, and wits. You did the job vigilantly on the water and creatively, yet no less vigilantly, in the boardroom. There was no such thing as a brand mystique. You were the brand. This was and remains the heart and soul of Moran's business philosophy, and the company's reputation continues to be its most important and protected asset. Now, this photo that we're looking at was taken around the 1890s on South Street in New York City's South Street Seaport. At the time, Moran was operating solely in New York Harbor. Let's take a look at a map that we designed for Moran's current corporate brochure that shows the company's profile now. Currently, Moran operates in 17 ports and 5 LNG terminals. LNG, by the way, is liquefied natural gas. And the company operates more than 100 vessels. There are two underlying factors that help to explain Moran's success over the years. One is that 90% of the world's cargo is transported by sea. And a second is that in ports on the US East and Gulf coasts, most of the vessels that call are docked by Moran tugs. So now you've got an idea of the background of the brand. Let's move along to the brand challenges and how we met them. Here is an ad that we designed for Moran, and here you see the redrawn logo. As you can see, the shape is much simpler, much more harmonious with other elements. The name is much larger, and that certainly helps. And you can see that we opted for very vivid photography, which we feel really tells the story. The tugs are very contemporary looking, very sleek, and they look powerful and agile. You can see that the headlines are always very succinct. The reader can merely read the headline and not even read the text and already get a good portion of the communication. Here is the capabilities kit that we designed for Moran for the new graphics program, the new identity program, I should say. Notice that we are using color coding for the various business segments. The pockets are vertical so that the brochures don't fall out in your lap when you hold the book. And here we have a touch of subliminal advertising. This is actually something called a fairway buoy, and it marks a shipping channel that's been engineered and dredged to ensure safe passage and smooth sailing. We also have nautical flags that spell out the name Moran in the letters M-O-R-A-N, and on the cover, a state-of-the-art tugboat. And here is the new Moran website that we designed. Now, this is a website that customers often really do use to extract information on the company. And so it's designed with a very simple navigation system that uses word menus. And we call it a hub navigation system because it appears at the top of each page and it's on every page of the website, which means that you can get to any page from any other page without ever having to use the back browser or scroll through vertical content. Here you see the fleet list, which is a good example of an informational function on the website. A customer can tell whether Moran is operating a 6,000 horsepower tug in the port of Norfolk, Virginia, simply by consulting the fleet list here. And here you see some of the drop-down menus alongside the rotating slideshow that appears on the home page and certain other pages on the site. And you can see that you get a menu there, and then you get a sub-menu. If you choose corporate profile, it will ask you, would you like to see the corporate overview or the history, the mission statement, so on and so forth. There's the services menu. As you can see, Moran has other key services besides ship docking and marine transportation. There's offshore and contract towing, LNG terminal operations, special projects like the construction of the New York City subway, for instance, and environmental services. Here is the Our Services menu expanded further, and now it's asking you, what kind of marine transportation would you like to see? Would you like to see dry bulk products, petroleum products, so on and so forth? And there you see a petroleum tanker in New York Harbor with the Statue of Liberty way in the background there. And here we are with Moran's new magazine. This is a redesign of Towline. And as you can see, we designed a logo for Towline. And here you see what we call the insignia version of the Moran logo. This was the original logo as it was originally conceived, with the name small underneath the chimney. But you can see that it's the redrawn version. And you can see how the insignia version really does work better in this layout than the horizontal version might. So it's sometimes good to have more than one signature of a logo. Again, you're seeing a full bleed photograph used very dramatically. It's very engaging and really draws you in. And on the inside, very good, strong, clean typography, beautiful photography. Some of these photos were actually taken by one of Moran's port managers who was invited on this Coast Guard ship. It was an exciting trip for him. The Coast Guard is not for those who have fear of heights. Here we did an article in which we had our reporter ride along on a tugboat on the Neches River in Texas. And here are some of the exciting pictures from that trip. This is a tugboat docking a methane tanker, I believe that is. This was from an article on safety. And here is a hair-raising tale, a true tale, of a death-defying rescue at sea that was written by a retired Moran tugboat captain. And we edited it and added the pictures. That is the actual tugboat, by the way. And the magazine even includes book reviews. Here's a book on the history of container shipping, which was actually a very exciting story. Let's now talk about results. I must note at the outset that Moran's approach to gauging marketing results is unusual. In the 19 years that Moran has been a Schnapper Design client, I've repeatedly asked whether there are any metrics they'd like us to look at. Say sales figures, feedback from focus groups, website hits, and I was told that it's not necessary. Growth was excellent, and I could simply follow their lead. We did receive unsolicited feedback in the form of letters from Towline readers, however, and this was significant because Towline is Moran's flagship advertising vehicle. All of the notes were expressions of praise. Two of the writers, a vice president at Shell Oil and a venture capitalist, wrote that they were deeply impressed with the quality of Towline's writing, photography, and design. Based on broader industry metrics that we've tracked on our own, we've seen evidence that 2001 through 2017 were highly profitable boom years. For example, in 2016, the total dollar value of general and bulk cargo handled by the Port of New York, New Jersey alone exceeded $203 billion. That was an all-time record, and it represented a lot of ship docking and marine transportation business for Moran, who is the leading provider in the port. And there have been other less direct indicators. During the years we've worked with Moran, the company expanded into 4 new ports, acquired 3 companies and built 48 new vessels, and founded its own safety and training school, among other advancements. We know that with a younger company, those actions would not necessarily be reliable indicators of solvency, let alone growth. But Moran is a 160-year-old company with a track record of stability and growth. So what role did improved brand identity and communications play in this growth? They were an integral contributing factor. They helped Moran consolidate its market position of brand leadership by leveraging a consistent brand voice and a unified program of visual communication. They've already yielded a bountiful return on investment, not only in strengthened brand equity and employee morale, but also in savings of time, labor, and expense. And they fulfilled collateral goals. We learned, for example, that our work has freed up time for Moran's senior management, who previously were spending too much time on reviewing communications. Some of our solutions, such as the Moran website's streamlined information architecture and a standardized PowerPoint presentation linked to a slide library, have proved to be big time savers for employees and customers. Others, like Towline Magazine, boosted employee morale, helped promote safety, and captured customers' attention with engaging content. That brings us to the ultimate question. What might your brand learn from Moran's experience? We think the biggest lesson is that when a brand's identity and communications flow from an authentic commitment to quality, service, and culture, that consistency creates the most powerful sales driver imaginable. Once, for instance, Moran informed us that in compliance with government regulators who were seeking to reduce oil spills, Moran had converted its entire tanker barge fleet to double-hull vessels. In fact, they had completed this transition 9 years ahead of the government's deadline. I remember hearing that and thinking that there was little we could create that would make more of an impression on Moran's customers, employees, and the public than that simple fact. In practice, then, good branding tends to follow a cycle. As the brand takes steps that enhance its value, the brand communicator reports these developments in a plain-spoken voice married to compelling and appealingly presented visual evidence. For example, Moran invested heavily in creating a culture of safety. We communicated that. You can see that on this tow line cover that you're looking at. That's a photograph of new recruits, seafarers who will be working on tugboats and barges, undergoing firefighting training at Moran's new training and safety school. It's quite a dramatic picture and really tells the story. In addition, through collaborations with leading-edge naval architects, engineers, and shipyards, Moran fielded major innovations in marine technology. We communicated that as well, and so on and so forth. As a result, Moran's brand is linked with safety and innovation in the minds of its customers and employees. Another basic lesson concerns the role of information in today's branding. When it comes to authenticity, information is the currency of the realm. When a brand does good things, information becomes the strongest selling tool in the kit. And in a marketplace where social media is the new word of mouth, an exponentially accelerated and expanded word of mouth, information is the most persuasive marketing tool you can utilize. Moran parlayed that principle to success, starting in the days when word of mouth was literally just that. There are some additional lessons, but brevity dictates that I end here. So I'll leave you to infer them on your own.
Well, thank you, Mark. That's was an interesting story and interesting case of a brand with a long, long history. At the beginning of your talk, you mentioned that the company had come to the conclusion that their brand needed a visual and verbal kind of upgrade, if you will. How did they come to that conclusion?
I don't really know the direct answer to that question. I can only tell you that Moran continuously seeks ways to improve their competitive edge in the marketplace, and they really do examine everything. And it seems they hadn't gotten around to this for quite a while. And I can tell you that the chairman, the president, and the senior vice president of sales were pivotally involved in the effort. That's really all that I know.
Was there a brand champion, if you will, at Moran, or was it a single person or a group of people?
We were actually very fortunate because there was not just one, there were literally many, starting with the CEO himself, who was very enthusiastic about what we were doing. And so you had senior management in the executive suite and many middle-level managers, all of whom were very astute about the whole process. And they were very, very enthusiastic and eager to proceed with the new materials that we developed and the new look.
You mentioned also that you did a lot of research at the beginning of the engagement with them. You did a lot of interviews with their internal staff. Is that typical for a project that you would be involved with, to do a lot of research before you start developing designs and design direction? And
I would describe it as standard operating procedure. We do it on every project, and we really consider it essential. I would add that the amount of research that we do depends on the scope of the project.
And you had mentioned that Moran kind of transcended the mystique of their brand. Don't brands need some type of mystique?
I would say that it depends on the type of brand. There are business-to-business brands like Moran, for example, for whom mystique is not the most important thing. It could even be counterproductive. Their market sectors tend to be more information-oriented. On the other hand, if you're selling soft drinks, then a mystique is going to be more important for your brand. And it might even be the dominant factor.
So you're talking about research and lots of analysis beforehand, obviously a wide range of things that you actually created for them to help move their brand forward. It sounds like a lot of expense. What about companies that don't quite have those deep pockets? How does that all come together?
Well, that's a challenging question, of course. Regarding that issue, I would offer two pieces of advice for any brand with any size budget. First, approach brand identity and brand communications as an investment. And in that regard, you would apply a strategy. I think that unlike financial investments, however, an investment in design is more about your appetite for value than your appetite for risk. For instance, a logo is a good logo is a major asset for your business. Think of IBM. They've been using the same logo for 64 years, a logo that they only commissioned once and modified in minor ways only a few times. That has been a tremendous asset for that business, and it could be for yours too. Secondly, I would look for ways, I would have a designer help you look for ways to economize without cutting corners and to clarify the distinction between economizing and cutting corners. You can see this reflected in a design proposal when you first start working on a project with a designer and the designer submits a proposal. In my firm's proposals, you'll find a verbal rehearsal of the project that really outlines a lot of plans and a lot of solutions to problems within the overall problem, including mitigating small budgets. So you can do a lot of strategizing, a lot of planning, just as you would with any investment. And you can build incrementally. I suppose that's a third principle. You can start with something like a good logo, and from there you can add on web pages, websites, brochures, so on and so forth. But it's always good to bear in mind that something that has a great deal of quality and communicative power is much more valuable to you than great quantities of mediocre communications. So a logo, in hardcore realistic terms, a logo could wind up costing 10 times as much as 3 brochures. But if the 3 brochures are mediocre, the logo is going to have a lot more utility and a lot more value and a lot more longevity for you. So quality is extremely important in brand identity and brand communications. And the challenge with budgets, of course, is to reconcile it with whatever budget you have. That is my best advice.
Well, Mark, again, thank you for sharing that with us. I hope everyone finds some interesting little tidbits there that maybe could be applied to their businesses as well. Thank you for sharing, Mark. Appreciate it.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
All right.